Amen. All right, let's start our lesson. We've been talking about these beasts. This was what we talked about earlier last week. This is the first beast, like a lion, and had eagle's wings, and so forth and so on. And we tied this into chapter 2, this beast being representing Babylon. I want you to notice one thing about this. This beast had the wings, had eagle's wings. You know, just hold that in mind. And we go to the second beast. We talked about the first beast last week. The second beast says, and behold, another beast, a second, like, and we pointed out the word like, because it doesn't mean it's just like a beast. Some way, Daniel is, when he sees these, he's saying, you know, it's kind of like a lion. And then he says, it's kind of like a bear. Doesn't mean it's a bear or a lion, it's like a bear or a lion. Like to a bear, and it raised up itself on one side, and it had 3 ribs in its mouth, in the mouth of it between the teeth of it. And they said thus unto thee, arise, devour much flesh. Somebody asked me last week when we read this, who is they? He said, and they said unto it, who is they? Remember when we started this, there were 4 winds that stirred up the sea. And so it's the 4 winds. And remember that too is also the word rock, meaning breath or spirit. So we don't know exactly what a representation of 4 winds are, but it's whatever is causing all of this to take place. All right. So what we compared this to, and I'm not every theologian, not every prophecy teacher goes along with this idea, but I tie it to the statue that is in chapter 2. So you got this bear that comes up out of the sea, or bear-looking beast that comes up out of the sea. Unlike the lion, the bear is not near as fast, but it's a lot stronger. Nobody wants to tangle with a bear or a lion as far as that goes. But this bear comes up and it raises itself up on one side, which is important, and it has 3 ribs in its mouth, which is important, and it's a bear, which is important. So we see. I'm sorry?
Was the ribs attached to its mouth?
It's got its ribs in its mouth, which is significant in that whatever these 3 ribs are, and we'll see a little bit later, but whatever these 3 ribs are, all that's left of them is the ribs. All that's left is the bone, and it's got those in its mouth. Okay, if we tie that to the arms of silver and in Revelation chapter 2, and if it represents the same thing, then it would represent the Mede and the Persian Empire headed up by Cyrus. I got to mention this again, even though I mentioned it almost every time his name will come up. In Isaiah chapter 44 and 45, his name is mentioned. His name is called out by the prophet Isaiah. But did you know that's 150 years before Cyrus ever existed? You know, it's just amazing the Word of God. I am so amazed at the accuracy of the Word that we serve. People say, well, there's a mistake here, there's a mistake there, mistake. But when you really get into it and get to look at it, there's no mistake at all. You know, the Word of God. But anyway, Cyrus. And in chapter 5, we see where the Babylonian, kingdom fell as Cyrus's army entered into the city. And as far as we know, there was very few that was even killed. They were in the city and had taken the city over before people even knew it. I read one place where it was 24 hours later that people found out that the Persians were in charge in the city. You know, we know that Belshazzar, we know that he died that night, but other than that, we don't know of anyone else dying in the city. It's like a bear. Now, Persia, this fits Persia. Let me say something else before we go any further. Comparing it to Daniel chapter 2, as we compare it, what I see happening here is that with this picture that he's giving us here, he gives us more detail as to these kingdoms. As we go into chapter 8, he goes and gives us more details about two of these kingdoms. And what I think is happening here is that it's like we used to do drawings, and sometimes we would do the basic drawing, then we'd have an overlay that would go on that drawing, and then maybe another overlay that would go on that drawing, and each one would be adding information until finally you got a full picture. And I think that's what's happening here in the book of Daniel. But anyway, when Persia took over, they extended the territory that Babylon had. So it got bigger, you know, under their reign. And of course, there were two main groups, the Persians and the Medes, and the which are today the descendants of the Iranians and the Kurds. We all do that. But anyway, and these two unified to defeat Babylon, and that happened in 539 BC. But notice, and I think I have it here. Yeah, the bear raised up itself on one side. And the reason we get that picture is because these two kingdoms, one was so much stronger than the other. Cyrus was a half Mede and half Persian. But he took the rule of the Persian Empire, went against his grandfather, and the Median generals took his side, and he took over, you know. And the Persians were so much stronger, that's why you get the bear raising up on one side, you know, it's because that kingdom is so much stronger than the other. And of course, Astyages was Cyrus's grandfather, and so the generals, they assisted him in his takeover. And then, of course, history tells us that Cyrus moved his capital to Ecbatana, and we'll see that on the map here in just a minute. He adopted the system of government, though, that the Medes had. And you were a history teacher, were you not?
But I can't remember where exactly were the Medes located, in what area?
Let's wait till I get the map up, and we'll see if we can see it there. Now Darius, we don't know exactly who he was either. Possibly one of the generals that took Babylon. Remember that Cyrus wasn't actually in the group that took Babylon. It was about 21 days later that he finally arrived in Babylon, and it was two generals that had taken the city. One of them died less than a month after entering the city. And the other one may be the one, you know, they had several names back in those days. I mean, they changed their names regularly. I've been studying the Herodian dynasty, and they just like to use the same names all the time. I mean, you'll have Antipater here, Antipater here, and Antipater here. I mean, it's easy to get lost in there because they just use same names over, or they've changed their name. So, yeah. So that's what Darius may have had another name, and the name ended up maybe was that the Bible called him by. But anyway, the 3 ribs in his mouth. See, when the Persian Empire took over that part of the world, the 3 that they had to conquer was Egypt, Lydia, and Babylon. So that's why you see the 3 ribs in the mouth. Not much left, just the bone of those kingdoms. Now Lydia is the area, kind of the area of where Turkey is. It's kind of given a general, So anyway, and he devoured much flesh. The territory of the Medes and Persian was that much greater than the other one. Looking at the mount, if you look kind of in the area what is upper Iraq now, and part of Turkey and part of Iran nowadays, it's in that area right there was the Medes. It'd be kind of general area of Nineveh, in somewhere in that area would be where the Median Empire was. Not near as strong. In fact, the descendants of the Medes are still there. And in fact, the Kurds are the ones that's fighting ISIS so gallantly over there right now, even though they don't have a lot of help. But anyway, this the dark area, and I'll tell you what color it was if I could tell colors, but it's the darker area. That's the area that the Persian Empire controlled during the time. Quite an area. And there, of course, is where Cyrus made his capital. Now moving on, we got to go to the 3rd beast. After this, we've accounted for the lion and the bear as being the first 2 kingdoms of the statue that in chapter 2. The head of gold and the chest and arms of silver. And that's significant too, that you had the 2 arms which represented the Medes and Persians. Just like on the statue too, at the end you'll have 2 legs, which represents the east and the west kingdom of the Roman Empire. And we'll get into that a little bit more as we go along. But it says here, after this I beheld, and lo, like a leopard, and lo, another, like a leopard, which had upon the back of it 4 wings of a fowl. The beast had also 4 heads, and dominion was given unto it. Okay. This beast had wings also, but it had 4 wings too. You notice anything about the wings though? You remember what the wings that was on the first beast?
Were of an eagle, the other, this was a fowl.
This one here is the wings of a fowl.
It's spectacular.
And you can tell right off that there's an indication that that's come down somewhat. No longer the wings of an eagle, that gallant bird that controls the sky. But now, and the fact of the matter is, the word fowl here means a bird that can fly. It has to be a bird that can fly that has wings, But it could be anything from a sparrow, to a buzzard. No, but it's a fowl, and it has 4 wings, which gives us an indication, just like on the statue, that everything is coming down in value and significance, But anyway, it has these 4 wings, and it has 4 heads, and on the statue, we had the hips and the thighs of brass. As the metal becomes less in value, this animal here becomes less in value too, as far as the means that it had. But notice something here, and dominion was given to it. It didn't say anything about that in the first two beasts, but we know that God's in control. But I think there's significance about this statement here, and dominion was given to it. Because what's going to happen is later we're going to see that God adds some more information to this kingdom. Any questions, comments? Nobody? Yes, ma'am.
Well, and that, the name Darius, I read that, they think that meant like a pharaoh or an office more than the name of the person, because they haven't been able to find any actual, that person in any of the,
No secular history of that
yeah, when
person
they
by
dig
that
the
name.
digs and all that stuff, so they don't have any Darius, except for an office of Darius.
That's right. There's no that's why some people say the Word of God. Daniel has been one of the most attacked books in the Bible. I think I mentioned the fact, if you were to read Sir Robert Anderson, not this Sir Robert, but Sir Robert Anderson's book, The Coming King or The Coming Messiah or something. Anyway, if you were to read that, what he's doing, and this is back in the 1800s, what he was doing is trying to refute the German theologians who were saying that the book of Daniel couldn't have been written before the events that were happening here, and probably didn't even deserve being in the Bible. But to us, who've, as Christians, we realize the value of Daniel, most especially with the book of Revelation, So, anyway, any more comments before we go on to the third beast here? Now, I read where, this is just a little additional info. I was reading, they said that a leopard will attack almost anything. It will attack a lion, even though it may not be as big as a lion. A leopard, it said, is not afraid of anything. And I thought, that's interesting. It says we have here a leopard, and of course this leopard represents Greece. Alexander the Great succeeded his father in 336, and he was just 23 years old when he became king of Greece. And he set out to destroy Persia, because Persia was their sworn enemy. And he did that. With lightning speed, that may be the why that there are 4 wings on this animal, is because he moved with such lightning speed when he started at 23 years old. In fact, he defeated Darius twice. And the physicians and Tyre and all of these, Palestine, they just give up. They just saw him coming, they just give up. Egypt, he took them in 331 BC. The point being is that there's where he defeated Darius again. But he continued east all the way to the borders of India, and it would have gone further. Except his men said, we're not going any further. We're so far away from home now, that we're just not going any further. There's story, I don't know whether it's true or not, but about Alexander the Great, that says that at this point that he wept because he didn't have any more places to conquer, you know. But here's the point, that in 10 years, he had conquered all of the known world. So with the four wings, it kind of represents the speed at which he had ascended the throne. And he died, some say at 32, and some say at 33. But he died in Babylon. They recognized or acknowledged him to be a god. And so he made Babylon his capital, and he died there. We don't know exactly what he died of. Some said that he died of a venereal disease. You know, whether that's true or not, we don't know. But anyway, he'd stretched the kingdom of the Greek Empire all the way to the border to India in less than 10 years. And probably would have done a lot more, except that he died. Let's just look at that. And look, see the X's on the map up there? That's the places where battles took place. Other than that, he moved with such speeds that people were just giving up. Judah just give up. Jerusalem just give up. And other places just give up because they see him coming with such speed. By the way, the Persians, I'm digressing here just a bit, but the Persians had, being this barren, they could field more troops than any other nation. In fact, the matter is, Xerxes, who was the ruler in the book of Ruth, he could put 2.5 million soldiers in the field. You know, they had some tremendous armies back then, you know, military. But anyway, that's the map of the empire, all the way Macedonia, got Turkey, what is modern day Turkey now, and Egypt, and all of this, and made it as far as India. And he would have probably had China, had his troops, you know, willing to go further. Let me ask you, what happened after Alexander's death? Anybody know? After he died?
Yeah, didn't his generals divide up the empire?
Correct. Remember how many heads that this leopard had? It had 4 heads. So now we get into what happened there. These 4 generals, they divide up the territory. Lysimachus, he took Thrace and Bithynia, and Cassander, he took Macedonia and Greece. Seleucus, and remember this kingdom here because it becomes important in chapter 8. Seleucus, he took Syria, Babylon, and the territories all the way to as far as they went into Ptolemy, he controlled Egypt, Palestine, Arabia, and Bactria. And over the coming years, the descendants of Ptolemy and Seleucus, they fought over the territory of Judah and Palestine in that area there. These 2 Greek dynasties that we're talking about, the Seleucids and the Ptolemies, they come into history most especially back under Antiochus Epiphanes. How many of you are familiar with them? Anybody? Well, maybe you'll get familiar in a little bit with that. But anyway, all of that, it is those two kingdoms and their constant struggle, and finally the Seleucid kingdom, they got control of Palestine, of Judea. It was during that time that the Jews rebelled, under Antiochus Epiphanes. They rebelled, and a lot of bad things took place during that period of time. But the Jews ended up winning, and for about 100 years there was a dynasty known as the Maccabean dynasty, and under Jewish rule. And that lasted into the period of the rise of Antipater and Herod, the Great, the one that we read about in the Bible. In other words, these 400 years between Malachi and Matthew that we talk about being the silent years, wasn't really that silent. There was just a lot of stuff taking place during that period of time. And it is the restoration of the temple under the Maccabean group that is celebrated by the Jews nowadays as Hanukkah. That's what it's all about. We'll look at that a little bit more later. Cover that. And 63 BC, though, which was probably a mistake on the Jews' part, was that two of the Maccabean brothers were arguing over who needs to be king. And they asked the Romans to intervene. Well, that created a problem, and then there was a war, and the Romans ended up controlling Judea. So that's it in a nutshell. But, and again, I can't tell the difference I can tell the difference in colors, I just can't tell what color they are. But I'm going to show you the kingdoms that each one of these guys ruled. Lysimachus, he ruled that color right there. Everybody got it?
Pale green.
Yeah.
Pale orange.
Well, what is modern day Turkey and Greece? There's Pergamum, one of the churches. There's Sardis, one of the churches. Anyway, Lysimachus controlled that part. Seleucus, he controlled all of this color here, starting up there all the way back here. So he had a huge territory. Cassander, he held Macedonia and Greece, whatever color that is. Purple, okay, that's good. And then Ptolemy, of course, he controlled Egypt, Palestine, Arabia, so forth, all that color. The thing is, it's these two nations right here are the ones that fought over the territory. You see Jerusalem there? Fought over the territory of Judea. And that becomes important when we go to chapter 8. And I think there are some other things that tie together that kind of tells us a little bit about maybe where this future man of sin will come from. As we look at it.
What was their reason for fighting over this one more territory?
Well, if you look at it,
Like yours now.
if you look at it, how do you get from up here down to northern Egypt? This is all desert.
Trade routes.
I mean, it was the land
Who would want it?
approach to the rest of the world. Otherwise, they try and cross the desert, and that is a desert, folks. I mean, So that, and another thing is back then, and the more I read about those people crazy.
Really?
I guess so.
At least we today can call those people crazy. Okay.
Well, I mean, it hadn't changed. So, no, I'm not saying that we've changed, but those people were crazy too. You know, they just, some of the things that and they were power hungry.
Well, they changed the reason.
Again, didn't change very much. That's all. Right. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about these four winds, a little bit. Now, this is a lot of history, I know that. I know sometimes it gets kind of boring, and Judy don't care for it at all. She's not a history type person. But anyway, but in order to understand what maybe God is trying, why would God call out these countries? Why would he even go to the business of defining where and what a country was going to do in the end time, unless it was important? Sure. So just bear with me. We'll get into some of the where I start throwing kind of, yes, ma'am.
I just thought, to me, it's very significant because today we're looking at that area. That is the center of everything we're looking at today about the changes in the world. And it was written in Daniel of all the things that preceded it. And to me, it's really important. I was showing my grandkids where the different countries were in the Bible, and I said, this is where we are talking about in the newspaper today. You see this name? That's where it was in the Bible. It's very significant. To me, we're talking about the same area again.
And we got the same people.
The same?
Who had heard about the Kurds 50 years ago?
That's
Anybody?
right.
You know, that wasn't a drugstore conversation. You know what's happening with the Kurds now? You know? Or some of the other countries over there, or whoever knew anything about Sharia, or whoever knew anything about Sunni and yeah. Yes, ma'am.
I was just gonna say, I heard on the news today that they're gonna make a camp for all the refugees in the plain of Nineveh. And I thought, well, that's biblical. That's a biblical place. You know, trying to pull all these people that are leaving and have no homes to go back to. If you look at the picture, they have nothing to go back to. They've destroyed everything, and they're gonna go to the plains of Nineveh and make a huge camp for the people trying to provide the needs of all these families. They lost their homes, they lost their possessions, they lost their jobs, they lost everything. You talk about wonders and makers, but I thought that was kind of neat that when you were talking about Nineveh this
And
morning.
then the fact of what God is doing among them over there too.
Yes.
I mean, amazing conversions that are taking place. Okay, folks, we gotta stop. By the time we get started, it's time to stop.
You think people pray